A woman jogging notices a doll on the ground as she reaches out to pick it up. A wolf-like figure suddenly attacks her. The scene shifts to two detectives, Nick Burkhardt and Hank Griffin, who are observing women in the area. When one of them unexpectedly transforms into a monstrous figure, Nick is confused and unsure if she's real or just a hallucination. Later, Nick and Hank go to the crime scene to investigate there. Nick finds the victim's iPod playing the song Sweet Dreams at Night. Nick returns home to find his Aunt Marie. After his parents' death, Aunt Marie raised him. As they talk outside, a monstrous creature attacks them. Nick manages to shoot and kill the creature, which then transforms back into a human. Aunt Marie, injured from the fight, lies on the ground. She tells Nick that his parents didn't die in a crash. They were killed. She then hands Nick an antique key and urges him to protect it at the hospital. Aunt Marie regains consciousness and reveals that Nick is a Grimm person with special powers who can see things others cannot. She tells him that if he wants more answers, he should visit her trailer. Nick heads to the trailer where he finds strange books and weapons. Just as he's looking through the books, his girlfriend, Juliet, arrives, so he quickly closes the book and leaves with her. The next day, Nick and Hank investigate a missing girl who was last seen walking to her grandparents' house. They follow her route and find boot prints leading them to a house where Nick witnesses a man transform into a wolf-like creature. Nick believes the man is responsible for the girl's disappearance and attacks him. However, when backup arrives, no evidence is found. That night, Nick returns to the man's house, keeping an eye on him. The man eventually confronts Nick, and after a brief exchange invites him inside for a drink. The man Monroe reveals that he's a blood-bad creature from Nick's Grimm books known as the Big Bad Wolf. Monroe shares that Grimms have written about his kind for centuries. Nick, still trying to understand everything, asks Monroe for help in finding the missing girl. Monroe hesitates but agrees. Using his blood-bad abilities to track her scent, they go to a house where the girl is being held. Nick calls Hank for backup, and together they confront the kidnapper, who claims to be a postman. They find no direct evidence linking him to the crime, but as they are about to leave, Hank hears a song he recognizes from the missing girl's iPod. They return to the house now in the dark, and the kidnapper attacks them. Hank shoots him, and as the man falls, he transforms back into a normal human before he dies. He calls Nick a Grimm. The detectives then search the house again and find the missing girl locked in the basement. Later that night, when Nick visits Aunt Marie, the same girl from earlier appears again, trying to inject Aunt Marie. Nick intervenes, and the needle ends up in him, causing him to lose consciousness. The girl then meets with Captain Sean Renard, the captain of the Portland Police Department, revealing that they are both involved in a larger plot against Aunt Marie and Nick. A couple, Rocky and Gilda, sneak into an empty house while the owners are away. They drink beer, eat food from the fridge, and head to the bedroom. Suddenly a car pulls up. The guy looks out the window and sees someone approaching, so he panics and they decide to escape through the window. The girl jumps out first, but just as the guy is about to follow, a creature attacks him. The girl runs away in horror. Nick later learns from a doctor that traces of PHDX3 neurotoxin commonly found in spider bites are in his blood. The doctor advises him to visit the hospital if he feels feverish. Nick and Hank review CCTV footage to identify the girl who attacked Nick, but her face is unclear. In the next scene, Gilda is at the police station to file a report on her boyfriend's disappearance. She leads Nick and Hank back to the house where it all happened. There they meet the owners, Frank and his wife Diane, who demand that the intruders be caught while investigating. Nick notices a strange claw in the glass. Nick later visits Aunt Marie in the hospital, where she tells him that it is now his responsibility to hunt dangerous Wesson just like his ancestors. She also warns him about a secret group, the Reapers, that recently attacked her. She urges Nick to keep the trailer's existence a secret before she can say more. Her health worsens, and a nurse asks Nick to leave. Nick and Hank return to the house to question Barry, Frank's son. Nick notices Barry's face briefly transform into a bear. Later Nick visits Monroe, who identifies the sea claws belonging to a Jaeger bar, a Huon that uses the sea claws during a Rojas ritual where they hunt prey as the sun sets. Gilda, angry and armed with a gun, arrives at Diane's house and asks her about Rocky. That's when Barry attacks her. Nick goes to Frank and warns him that Barry plans to kill Rocky. During the ritual, they rush to a cave, but Rocky and Gilda have already escaped in the jungle. Frank tries to stop Barry, but Diane accidentally triggers one of Barry's traps and gets severely injured. The medical team takes her to the hospital, and the police arrest Barry and his accomplices. Later, Aunt Marie is attacked in the hospital, and Nick arrives just in time, but he is unable to save her. She dies in his arms. The final scene shows Naked or Grave unaware that a creature watches him from behind the bushes. People board a tram, including a sharply dressed woman and a man carrying a suspiciously large duffel bag. Tension builds as the man reaches inside. But instead of pulling out a weapon, he surprises everyone by taking out a stereo. Suddenly, YMCA starts blasting, and the tram erupts into an unexpected flash mob. The driver and regular passengers are left confused, but when the tram stops and empties, the driver discovers the sharply dressed woman lying dead on the floor. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene to investigate. The woman's body is swollen, leading Sergeant Wu to suggest anaphylactic shock. He mentions a recent incident where a dog was attacked by a swarm of bees in the park. Nick notices a small puncture wound behind the woman's ear. Later, the medical examiner, Dr. Harper, confirms that Serena, the victim, died from an abnormally high dose of bee venom, classifying her death as a homicide at Serena's law firm. Her sudden death leaves her co-workers and boss shocked. In the next scene, Nick and Hank consult a beekeeper to learn more about the venom. The beekeeper reveals that the venom is artificially harvested, but raises suspicion by providing an alibi without being asked. Surveillance footage from the tram doesn't reveal much, but a few witnesses from the flash mob come forward. One of them, Doug, acts suspiciously, refusing to show his phone during questioning. When pressed, Doug transforms briefly into an insect-like wheezing, confirming Nick's suspicion that this case involves the Ween world. Nick and Hank follow Doug to an abandoned paper mill. There they spot him, meeting with another man and a woman, exchanging mysterious items. Suddenly a swarm of bees attacks, forcing Nick and Hank to take cover after the attack. The detectives link the mill to Melissa Wincroft, a woman whose business was destroyed in a lawsuit led by Serena and her colleagues. Nick identifies Melissa as a bee-like Wesson who can communicate with bees and use them as a warning system. It becomes clear that Melissa is targeting Serena's colleagues for revenge. Adeline Shade, the final target, is in protective custody and the tension rises. Nick realizes that Adeline is the hex and bees to attack his aunt, leading to a confrontation filled with distrust. Meanwhile, Melissa and her accomplice, the beekeeper, find them and use bees to corner Adeline. Melissa tells Nick that she's trying to protect him from a bigger threat. In the final showdown, Melissa warns Nick about his fate as a Grimm and the danger ahead when she threatens Hank. Nick is forced to act and Melissa is shot. As she dies, the bees also die. Her last words about Nick's destiny unsettle him back at home. Nick thinks about everything that's happening and knows Melissa's warning is serious. Just then, a lone bee stings him, a sign that the danger isn't over. A terrified woman smashes her hand through a glass window and flees into the night, pursued by unseen terrors. She sprints across a bridge, reacting in panic to phantom images of a tentacle-like monster and a buzzing saw blade. Suddenly a car strikes her. The driver Kent rushes to help, but another man appears and calmly instructs him to call 911. The man touches the woman's cheek and in a chilling moment she whispers for him to kiss her. Instead, he kills her by morning. Detectives Nick and Hank arrive at the scene. Kent, treated for minor injuries, recounts the accident and describes the mysterious man who disappeared. As the detectives examine the woman's body, they notice unusual injuries on her arms, suggesting she was fleeing from something far worse than the car accident. Meanwhile, a man enters an empty hotel room carrying a briefcase on a phone call. He cryptically assures someone that he will notify them when it is done. A report about a previous encounter with a Grimm and a Reaper flashes on a newspaper, revealing the Reaper's identity and setting the stage for the conflict ahead. Later, Dr. Harper informs Nick that the woman's cause of death doesn't match the accident. She identifies signs of asphyxiation, pointing to foul play. Hank discovers the victim is Faith, a woman who lives with her abusive husband, Roy. When the detectives visit Roy at work, he denies any involvement in her death, claiming they had argued the previous night over her social media activity and that she stormed out. Despite having no alibi, Roy insists he was waiting for her to return. As Nick and Hank investigate further, they uncover a troubling social media post from Faith that leads them to a bed and breakfast hotel near the bridge where she was killed. The owner, Billy, appears friendly but holds a dark secret. Billy recalls Faith's visit and mentions she seemed distressed, sensing something supernatural. Nick grows suspicious later. Billy is shown consuming a dead toad, revealing his Wes in nature. The investigation takes a darker turn as Nick and Hank uncover a disturbing pattern of missing women linked to Billy. Their findings reveal that in other cities, women have been found alive, but pregnant, kept in isolation and subjected to gas attacks. While staking out Billy's house, Hank notices a recently repaired window where Faith likely injured herself. Inside, he hears muffled cries and discovers women trapped in cages moments before they are exposed to gas. Nick asks Monroe for help to track Billy, a Wesin who uses supernatural charm to control his victims. Meanwhile, Captain Renard confronts the Reaper, cutting off his ear and warning him to stay away. When Nick and Monroe locate Billy's house, they rescue Hank and the captive women from the gas-filled basement. Billy tries to escape with another victim, leading to a dramatic chase. Though Billy is struck by a car, he uses his powers to trap a paramedic, giving himself a chance to flee. The final scene underscores that even in captivity, Billy remains a dangerous and ongoing threat. At a quiet dockyard, rats move over a dead bird. The calm is disrupted by loud music from a nearby rave. The crowd cheers for DJ Wretched Cat, who appears wearing a glowing pink cat head, intensifying the dark and mysterious atmosphere. Meanwhile, in a quiet music room, teacher Paul Lawson conducts a lesson with his students. When Brimley, one of the students, plays the wrong note, Lawson stops the class to correct him. Later, as Lawson walks to his car, he is enveloped in darkness and a swarm of rats suddenly surrounds his car, triggering a panic. The next morning, Assistant Principal Grace Kaplan discovers his body in the school parking lot and calls the police. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene where Grace explains how she found Lawson's body. Upon arriving at school, Sergeant Wu discovers rat cages marked with the name Geiger Pest Control, leading the detectives to question Lawson's students. Carter, Sarah, Marvin, and Trey, all from affluent backgrounds. During the questioning, Carter mentions Roddy Geiger, a former student now working at his father's pest control business. The detectives visit Geiger Pest Control, where they find Roddy playing the violin surrounded by caged rats. As Nick introduces himself, Roddy's father Geiger briefly reveals his true form as a rhino. Again, a rat like Zen and acts aggressively toward Nick. Roddy, frightened, runs away, but Nick manages to confront him and tries to earn his trust. Geiger accuses Carter and the other students of bullying Roddy and reveals they stole rat cages from the business. Roddy eventually opens up to Nick about his passion for playing the violin and the mistreatment he endures. He admits to being DJ Wretched Cat, but provides an alibi that Wu confirms as he knows Roddy from the Portland rave scene. Further investigation reveals that Lawson suffered a heart attack triggered by the rats, but the rats were not the direct cause of his death. Fibers found in a rat's stomach match a blanket from an expensive car, linking Lawson's death to Carter and his friends. As the investigation progresses, Sarah's mother accuses Roddy of harassing her daughter. But her dismissive and elitist attitude raises doubts about her claims later. Nick consults Monroe, who explains that Rhino again is usually peaceful and less provoked. Nick and Hank discover that Carter, Trey, and Marvin framed Roddy, leading to his expulsion from school driven by anger. Roddy uses his violin to summon a swarm of rats to rave at an abandoned warehouse. Unaware of the danger, the rich kids attend the rave and are attacked by the rats. Sarah is conflicted between her loyalty to her friends and her feelings for Roddy. She confronts Carter, but ultimately follows the group inside. Nick and Hank arrive just in time to prevent the situation from escalating further, dispersing the rats and rescuing the students. However, Roddy escapes, leaving his fate uncertain. The episode ends with Nick thinking about how his grim identity pushes Win away. while Juliet quietly deals with the growing problems in their lives, suggesting more challenges ahead. In the night, we see a geodome house in the forest inside Hap Lasser caught between his love for food and efforts to stay healthy. Amusingly works out with a vibrating exercise barbell. The barbell slips from his hands, flies out the window and lands outside. When Hap goes to get it, his house explodes. He is shocked, but miraculously unharmed. The next morning, Nick and Hank investigate the explosion and question Hap. He is more upset about losing his stuff, especially his Xena Warrior Princess comic. When Nick asks if he has been making bombs, Hap gets angry, shifts into his blood-bad form and denies it. He also mentions his brother Rolf, who died in a similar explosion, hinting at a dangerous pattern at the station. Hap calls Monroe his old friend and asks if he can stay with him. Nick questions Hap about possible suspects, but Hap says he's a nice guy who gets along with everyone, even people he owes money to Monroe. Nick's blood-bad friend arrives at the station and admits he knows Hap from a treatment program. Nick asks Monroe to watch over Hap. Meanwhile, a mysterious biker checks the explosion site looking at a broken gas pipe in a family photo. Nick and Hank investigate Ha's deaths and Rolf's death, but find no clear leads. Monroe takes Hap to his house, but Hap notices. Monroe seems uneasy. Monroe tries to reassure him, but remains on edge. Nick visits Monroe's house but is attacked by a biker who turns out to be Angie Ha's sister, and Monroe's ex Angie is angry at Nick for being a Grim. But Monroe steps in to calm her down. She tells Nick that Hap made her his insurance beneficiary, which makes her look suspicious. Angie gives an alibi, but Nick doesn't believe her that night. Monroe and Angie go on a blood-bad run, falling back into old habits. The next morning, Monroe wakes up in the woods with Angie and is shocked to see blood on their hands, proof of a hunt. Meanwhile, Hap answers the door to an assassin, disguised as a delivery man, and is fatally shot. Nick, Hank and Monroe investigate and discover a link between Angie and Orson, an arson investigator who is a Bauer swine, a pig like Wei Sen. Orson believes Angie killed his brothers, which makes him angry and vengeful in a tense showdown. Nick faces Orson, but Angie shows up and attacks him. Nick shoots at her, but she manages to escape in the end. Orson is linked to several crimes and Monroe is left devastated by Hap's death and his complicated history with Angie. The final scene shows Monroe watching an old childhood photo of himself and Angie sharing a kiss. A couple, Dustin and Lauren, hike through the woods. They accidentally stumble upon a hidden drug crop and are captured by a gunman named Delmar, who takes them to his camp. Just as Delmar prepares to kill them, he hears a noise coming from the woods when he steps away to investigate. He's attacked and killed by something unnatural. A vine wraps around his neck and strangles him as strange growls fill the forest. Dustin and Lauren watch the horrifying scene unfold, frozen in fear. The next morning, Nick and Hank arrive at the camp with other officers and DEA agents to investigate the drug crop. A DEA agent examines Delmar's body, noting his unnaturally twisted neck, and mentions that Delmar has been under investigation for 3 years. While inspecting the scene, Nick spots a single hair that doesn't belong to bald Delmar. Hank suspects someone else is involved. They also notice that Delmar's supplies have been raided, but the drugs are left untouched. Near Delmar's body, Nick spots another hair close to a broken sapling. While searching the area, Nick catches a glimpse of a supernatural creature. It looks like a young blood-bad, but before he can act, the creature, later revealed to be a teenage girl, runs off into the woods. Nick and Hank interview Dustin and Lauren, who explain their abduction and describe how the mysterious attacker saved their lives. Meanwhile, Delmar's brothers, Randall and Micah, arrive in town, furious in seeking revenge. At the morgue, they examine Delmar's body and angrily demand answers, certain there's more to his death than the police claim. As the investigation continues, Nick and Hank discover that the mysterious hair matches a case from 9 years earlier involving a missing girl named Holly Clark. Nick visits Monroe, who explains that Holly's blood-bad instincts likely helped her survive in the wild, not knowing her true nature. Holly has been living in the woods all these years. Nick and Monroe search the forest and find Holly's tree house. Inside they see items she uses to survive, including a trunk labeled Addison, Hank and Wu dig into Holly's past and uncover evidence pointing to Jimmy Addison, a former neighbor, as her abductor. When the team confronts Addison, he tries to fight back, but is quickly caught, proving he is guilty. At the same time, Randall and Mike are kidnapped, Dustin believing he knows what happened to Del Mar. Their search leads them to Holly's tree house, where they mistake Monroe for the person responsible for their brother's death. During the confrontation, a violent fight breaks out. Holly uses her supernatural abilities to stop one of the brothers while Nick takes down the other. Holly is badly injured, but finally remembers who she is. She has taken back to her mother, who has been waiting for her return for years. A few days later, Captain Renaud announces Holly's recovery during a press conference. Holly also identifies Addison as the man who abducted her 9 years earlier. The episode ends with justice being served as Addison is held accountable for his crimes. On a tense night, Judge Logan Pattinson sits in his upscale study. Suddenly an intruder smashes through the window and violently attacks the judge. The attacker, who seems immune to pain and incredibly strong, survives gunshots and keeps pounding the judge. Later, Sergeant Wu and his partner find Judge Pattinson's body in his house. The attacker, later identified as Stark, retreats to a secluded spot to treat his wounds. He casually removes a bullet and tosses away his severed hand, which regenerates, revealing he's not human. Nick and Hank are called to the crime scene and Police Chief Renaud joins them, a clue at the scene. A gavel with fingerprints leads them to another body, a man with a missing hand wearing a woman's watch. As they dig deeper, they realize the murders are all connected. Nick turns to Monroe, his friend who knows a lot about the Wynn world, for help. Monroe notices that the time and date on the watch are fixed, pointing them to Assistant District Attorney Mary Robinson. When they go to check on Mary, they find her dead with her tongue cut out and placed on a scale. Hank puts it together: Judge Pattinson, Vince Chilton and Mary Robinson were all involved in convicting Stark for murder years ago. Hank realizes he's next in line to be targeted and agrees to go into protective custody. While Hank is secured, Nick keeps investigating Stark hunting. Hank breaks into Nick's house and attacks him during the fight. Both Nick and Stark realize each other's true nature. Nick is a Grimm and Stark is a Segbata. Stark's strength almost defeats Nick, but Juliet saves him by throwing boiling water at Stark, forcing him to flee. Nick is badly hurt and rushed to the hospital. In the hospital, Monroe visits Nick and explains that Segbata are nearly impossible to kill, except with specific weapons. Luckily, Nick has those weapons in Aunt Marie's trailer. Monroe goes to the trailer and picks up the weapon. Meanwhile, Hank feels guilty for Nick's injuries and decides to take action. He admits to Nick that he and Mary Robinson suppressed evidence during Stark's original trial to ensure his conviction, determined to stop Stark. Hank agrees to set a trap in the showdown. Hank's gun is useless against Stark's resilience, but Monroe uses the special weapon to kill Stark. Hank, and stopping the killing in a tense moment in a parking garage, a man in a red shirt confronts another man, accusing him of something. As the man in the red shirt chases him deeper into the garage, he hears a strange noise turning around. He faces a terrifying figure who kills him in the confrontation. In a shocking twist, the man's body rapidly ages, looking like he's in his 70s, before the attacker dumps him in a dumpster. By morning, when the garbage truck picks up the body, it's young again. Detectives Nick, Hank, and Wu. They are called to investigate this strange murder. The man in the red shirt is identified as Drake. The investigation leads them to his apartment, where the landlord mentions a fight between Drake, his neighbor Mason, and his girlfriend Natalie. They find out that Drake has a history of domestic violence, and Natalie has run away from the scene. When they find Natalie, she tells them that a man named Marty, a downstairs neighbor, tries to help during the fight, but leaves when Mason shows up. She thinks Mason might be involved in Drake's death, though she admits Drake has many enemies. The investigation focuses on Marty, a quiet, timid man who doesn't seem like the type to fight Drake, but Marty turns out to be a Mauser, a harmless mouse like Wayne Monroe. Nick's blood-bad friend explains that Mauser are peaceful, unlike Mason, who is a Lazen Langer, a dangerous snake like Wisen. Monroe warns Nick that when a Mauser's in Luz and Slanger clash, it's never good for the mayor. Meanwhile, Juliet notices a man and a woman taking pictures of her from an orange car. When she approaches them, they drive off. She tracks them down and finds a terrified woman. The mystery deepens when Monroe is attacked during a clock repair appointment, and he wakes up to find a cryptic red side symbol painted on his car. As more people are killed, Marty's hidden anger toward Mason comes to light. Marty, overwhelmed by his emotions and seeing his abusive father in every reflection, kills Mason. He loses control and runs through his warehouse with Nick and Hank chasing him, surrounded by mirrors that confuse him. Marty lets Natalie go, but is filled with grief and guilt later. Nick visits Monroe, who explains that the STH symbol is a warning from the Reapers. Even though Nick is worried, Monroe stays loyal and ready to help him face the dangers of the Ween world. A tense chase unfolds in the forest as two young men, Stephen and Kevin, are pursued by strange, grotesque creatures with pointed noses. Stephen, injured, falls into a river and Kevin is captured. As Stephen's body floats downstream, Crow begins pecking at his eyes back home. Nick struggles with the secret of being a Grimm and the danger it could bring to his girlfriend. Juliet Monroe, his Westsyn friend, advises him not to tell her, saying that humans wouldn't understand these creatures. Nick's focus shifts when Stephen's body is found. They track down Adeline's cat, take it to Rosalie, and ask her to find a cure for Juliet. When Nick gets home, he finds the house has been messed up. He then sees Kimura coming down the stairs. In the final scene, Nick calls her mom, and that's how season 1 ends.